Have you ever wondered what happens when the choice that feels safest quietly begins to erase who you are? Not through arguments, but through soft nods and the long silence that follows dinner. There's something few people ever say out loud, that moving in with your children isn't always a homecoming. Sometimes it's a quiet disappearing right inside your own house. If you've ever fallen silent after stepping out of a room or hesitated before asking a simple question, am I bothering them? Then this video is for you. And before we go any further, if you feel this is a conversation that needs to be heard more often, please leave a comment or subscribe, not for us, but for someone your age, who might be waiting for a whisper just like this. There's a scent so faint, only those who've lived long in an old house would recognize it. The scent of aged wood, of sunlight fading on a wall, of the kitchen towel your mother once hand-washed and hung to dry on the old gourd vine trellis. And there's a kind of stillness, not because no one is there, but because every corner of that home knows exactly who it belongs to. When Mrs. Ann moved in with her son after a minor fall, the first one to notice the change wasn't a person, it was the refrigerator. She no longer taped up little notes like she used to. Carrots for the grandchild. Mint leaves, please don't throw away. Now it was neat, well-stocked, but silent. No more soft rustling of paper when the door opened. The kitchen still smelled of food, but not the kind she knew. It was fast, loud, efficient, and it missed something, a certain imperfection, the kind only someone older would understand. Like forgetting to turn off the stove, but never forgetting how to season by hand. The chair where she once read the morning paper, now used to hang her granddaughter's backpack, and though no one ever said it aloud, she started sitting at the edge of the sofa, closer to the hallway, so I won't block the little one when she runs. Have you ever stepped aside without anyone asking you to? Not because someone did something wrong, but because everything around you no longer made space for you. Mrs. Ann didn't feel sad. She simply sat a little longer after each meal. Sometimes she smiled into the distance, then softly said, "When your mom was your age, she used to leave her slippers like that too." A pair of small cotton slippers, left crooked by the doorstep. No one noticed, but she did, and it reminded her of her husband, who once told her, "When your shoes are in place, your heart stays at peace." Some losses don't arrive with a tragedy. They come when no one asks what kind of tea you're having today. They show up in the way your hand trembles as you pour tea for yourself, and no one notices, because everyone is rushing. Still, she pours, still peels fruit, still clears the dishes, even with fading eyes, not to prove anything, but because these hands still remember how. Maybe you're sitting quietly now, remembering something, an old bowl, a worn shirt, a room that now belongs to someone else. If so, please stay just a little longer, because the story doesn't end here. And the light, it's still flickering in the smallest of things. We just need to pause and look a little closer. Lately, Mrs. Ann no longer makes her way down to the kitchen early in the morning. Not because she's tired, but because the staircase now asks for more than a single breath to climb. She used to glide down each step without needing support. Now each stair requires a pause, not because of pain, but because of a quiet disorientation, just enough to make her stop. No one notices. Her son assumes she's sleeping in. Her granddaughter thinks she doesn't like breakfast anymore. But in truth, she still wakes up. She simply lingers longer by the window, gazing into that soft, dim morning light, where sunlight brushes gently across the old floral curtain she brought from her former home. The only thing that still sits exactly where it always has. Some changes arrive so quietly, like how she no longer uses the white porcelain teacup. Her hands are less steady now, or how she's switched from her beloved AM radio to listening to podcasts, but only when her granddaughter helps turn it on. They're small changes, yet they're enough to make someone who once stitched her own clothes, arranged flowers by hand, and walked to the market every afternoon, suddenly feel not quite herself anymore. Have you ever felt that way? When your body doesn't protest, but no longer walks beside you with the same ease? Mrs. Ann never complains. Not once. But in her eyes, there's a new kind of caution. As she walks past the kitchen, she slows down, listening for the sounds of cooking, wondering if her daughter-in-law might need a hand. And sometimes the answer comes in a polite smile. "You just rest, Mom." So she steps back. One step, then another. No one means to make her feel like she doesn't belong. But no one knows that someone who once sat at the heart of every family meal is now learning how to become a silent guest in the very house that echoes with children's laughter. One afternoon, a sudden rainstorm rolled in. She stood beneath the porch, watching the raindrops splash against the stone ledge. Beside her feet, a pair of slippers, slightly off-center, placed just the way her husband used to leave them. And for the first time in months, she softly whispered his name, only in her heart, as if to ask, "Did you ever feel yourself fading while no one noticed?" Not all change is a loss, but when no one asks, no one sees, you slowly stop telling your story. If you live in a home with someone older or are caring for aging parents, please remember, some changes need no words, just a slower gaze and a warm, simple nod. Because sometimes what we need most is just a small question, asked with care. "Would you like to brew the tea by hand, or shall I fetch the hot water for you?" That morning, the sky brought neither sun nor rain, just a gentle breeze drifting through the half-open window, and a sliver of light, thin as thread, stretching across the kitchen floor. Mrs. Ann sat there, holding a small paring knife, its blade slightly worn, the kind they don't sell in supermarkets anymore. But she kept it still, because it fits just right when peeling mango. In front of her sat a basket of fruit her daughter had brought home, grapes, apples, and a dragon fruit. Something she wasn't used to but wanted to try, because the little one thinks it looks pretty. She peeled the mango one slice at a time, as if stitching an old seam, carefully, evenly, not letting a single piece come out too thick. When her granddaughter skipped by, she held out the plate with a gentle smile. "Grandma still remembers how to cut evenly, you know." It wasn't said to prove anything, just a quiet way to affirm, these hands still know what they're doing. Have you ever found yourself doing something familiar, just to remind your own heart that you are still you? Mrs. Ann didn't demand a role. She didn't insist on cooking or ask anyone to follow her ways, but there was a small corner of the kitchen where she placed her own little jar of salt and pepper. Just so, when the soup came out, she could add a touch of her flavor. Sometimes dignity doesn't come from doing grand things. It comes from preserving a small ritual, a way to quietly say to oneself, "I'm still here." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, she stepped onto the balcony and slowly wiped the roots of a drying orchid. No one asked her to, no one noticed, but she remembered how her husband once said, "If you don't wipe its leaves, it won't bloom." So she wiped, with the edge of an old shirt, slowly, as if dusting off a memory. It's in the quiet gestures, those no one assigns, that she kept hold of the most precious thing of all, the ability to act on her own terms. And if you're living with your parents or caring for someone older, please remember, sometimes the only thing they truly want is to peel a mango, water a plant, or fold a towel neatly over the back of a chair. Not to help, but to hold on to themselves. Tomorrow, Mrs. Ann might drop an egg by accident. The hand soap might spill over the sink. But that isn't clumsiness. That is a real part of the journey, to keep alive the things that once felt natural. Sometimes all it takes is someone quietly standing by, not rushing to clean up. Just a soft look that says, "It's okay, Mom. Keep doing it. I like the way you do things." And that is enough. Enough to make this older friend of yours feel not like she's being taken care of, but like she's still living with you. That afternoon, Mrs. Ann caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, not on purpose. She was simply walking down the hallway when sunlight slipped through the curtain, and the mirror captured her reflection. She paused, not out of surprise, but because, in that moment, she realized the woman in the mirror had stepped back a little from herself. There was a time when every morning she would brush her hair, dab a touch of jasmine perfume on her wrist. Not for anyone else to notice, but to remind herself that she was alive, and life had rhythm. But ever since she moved into her son's home, that perfume bottle had been pushed to the back of the drawer, its place taken by supplements, doctor's notes, and a weekly pill organizer labeled morning, noon, night. It wasn't a loss, just a small shift, one that, day by day, nudged her further away from herself. One evening, she overheard laughter from the living room. The family was rewatching videos from their beach trip. Everyone was in it, laughing, shouting, covered in sand, except her. There was no frame long enough to see her clearly. She didn't feel upset or sad. She simply lowered her gaze and smoothed the edge of the tablecloth, the one she had washed and sun-dried by hand that morning. Some wounds don't bleed. They come as a quiet fading from the frame, from the conversation, from the things that once felt like yours. In her bedroom, there's a small photo frame on a wooden shelf, an old picture, her and her husband, newly married. The frame is faded now, one corner slightly worn by termites, but she keeps it, never replaces it. She told her granddaughter, one day the frame may fall apart, but the smile in the picture will still be there. The little girl didn't understand. She just smiled and hugged her grandmother tight. And maybe that's all it takes sometimes. A hug, enough to remind her she still has a place in this house, even if it means stepping back, just a little. If you've ever owned an old photo frame, a wooden chair by the porch, a pair of slippers placed just so each night, then you know these quiet objects hold memory. They gently stitch our dignity back together day by day. No one sees the wound, but the light still finds a way in if we leave just the smallest opening. If you're living with your parents, or even just passing through the kitchen where your mother still sits, notice the little things. An old photo left dusty, a worn-out sweater still worn with care, a nod in place of a spoken refusal. Because sometimes light doesn't shine from a new lamp, it lingers in a sliver of sunlight from long ago, falling softly across a wound no one has named. That day there was a small party at home. Mrs. Ann's daughter was hosting a birthday for her son, 10 years old. The music played softly, just enough to lift the air. Balloons were strung across the living room. The scent of birthday cake mingled with roasted chicken, filling the kitchen with the warmth of old family gatherings. Everyone was cheerful. Everyone had something to do. Someone was taking photos. Someone was setting the table. Someone was mixing drinks. Except her. She sat at the far end of the table near the door to the porch. No one asked her to sit there. She didn't ask permission. She simply chose a spot she thought wouldn't get in anyone's way. In her hand was a small plate of fruit. No one had served it. She had prepared it herself. A slice of apple, 2 pieces of mango, and a few grapes she had peeled one by one. She didn't smile much, but she wasn't sad either. She was simply quiet. Quiet like someone listening to a melody no one else remembers. Quiet like an old leaf drifting gently to the ground. Not breaking, not hurting, just returning to the earth. Have you ever sat in the middle of a joyful party and felt yourself drifting away, like a small boat without a sail? Not because no one loves you, but because they love you in ways that miss the mark. They show love through full plates, but never ask, "Mom, is there a story you want to share today?" They forbid heavy lifting, but never ask, "Mom, what do your hands miss doing most?" After the party, when everyone had gone off to rest, she quietly gathered a few dishes left on the table. No one told her to, no one noticed. She just wanted to touch something still warm, to remind herself there was still a reason to rise. Then she stepped onto the porch, sat down on the old rattan chair, the one brought over from the old house. Her hands rested gently on her knees. Her eyes gazed toward the end of the garden, where the motion sensor light flickered on and off with the breeze. There was a stillness deep inside her, not from loneliness, but because the world was moving too fast, too young, too convenient. And sometimes she just wished someone would pause and look at her, the way one might look at a mountain slowly disappearing into mist. If you're still here, still listening, Give yourself one more quiet minute. Don't do anything. Don't think. Don't try to understand. Just breathe. Just listen to your own heart, clear and gentle, like the sound of a broom sweeping early morning leaves. Some stories don't need telling. Sometimes, simply sitting beside each other in silence is enough to say, I'm still here, and I still hear you, even when you don't speak. The next morning, while the whole house was still sleeping in after the birthday party, Mrs. Ann quietly rose earlier than usual. Outside, the air was still veiled in a thin layer of mist. The only sound in the house was the soft hum of a kettle coming to boil, a sound she'd known since the 1970s in the old house where her grandmother once lived. This morning, she made tea, not with a machine, but by hand. She boiled water in a tiny aluminum kettle and steeped dry leaves she'd saved in a small wooden box, brought from her old home. No one asked her to make tea. No one told her what to do. But this morning, she wanted to begin the day by her own rhythm. Just like how, today, she moved the old rattan chair from the balcony right up beside the dining table. No longer sitting at the edge like a guest, no longer tiptoeing on the wooden floorboards. She simply wanted to see the morning sun pass through her cup of tea, to watch the steam rise through the light, just like it did when she was 30. Have you ever suddenly realized you're still whole just by changing your point of view and choosing a smaller, gentler rhythm? Mrs. Ann didn't need to reclaim all her old roles. She didn't expect her children to change their routines. All she wanted was a little corner where she could choose her own teacup at a wooden handrail by the stairs, not out of fear of falling, but because she liked to hum softly as she climbed. Someone once asked her, "Why do you whisper to yourself when you water the plants?" She smiled, "Because I'm talking to the roots." Coming home to yourself doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need grand declarations. Sometimes it's just a potted plant you replant with your own hands, a curtain you wash by hand because the machine tears old fabric, or a book bookmarked with a dry leaf pressed last autumn. And that is enough. Enough to remind yourself, I'm still here. That afternoon, when everyone had gone off to work, she quietly reorganized her small kitchen drawer, where she kept thread scissors, a sewing kit, and a few balls of yarn. She mended the blouse her daughter had worn the night before. A button had come loose. No one asked, no one saw. But when her daughter opened the wardrobe, she smiled softly and said, "Must have been Mom." Her hands are still so good. Some gestures are so small, no one is expected to remember them. But when done with love, they linger in someone's heart, like a familiar scent that never fades. If you're living with an older loved one, sometimes just give them a little room to do something old again. Not because it's efficient, but because it helps them feel like themselves. You might see them come alive again, not in dazzling light, but in the warm glow, like the fire that once flickered in the old kitchen hearth. And if you are that older soul, please, don't wait for permission to begin again. All it takes is something small. Brewing tea by hand, tending to a plant no one notices. Even that is a quiet, gentle way of telling the world, I'm coming back, not with youth, but with new eyes. That afternoon, the air softened. Nothing special happened. No one called her name. No instructions. No ceremony. Just sunlight falling gently across the porch, like the exhale of someone returning home from a long journey within. Mrs. Ann sat by the window. In her hands was a pale ash-gray scarf, the one she knitted each evening, not for anyone, but to keep rhythm in her hands and let her heart breathe evenly. The scarf wasn't meant for anyone in particular. She said, maybe I'll give it to my granddaughter if she likes the color. And if not, well, I still need something to finish. So she kept knitting, one stitch at a time, slowly, without rush, much like how she was learning to live again. Piece by piece. On the table, her tea had gone cold. She didn't brew another pot. She preferred how the old tea left behind its scent, quieter but somehow more honest. A soft breeze slipped through the window. The curtain swayed, and for a moment it brought back the image of her mother, who used to sit just like this, by the window, with trembling hands, but a gaze that was always warm. Have you ever seen yourself in the reflection of someone who's no longer here? Mrs. Ann didn't cry. She simply placed her hand on her chest, where her heart beat slowly beneath her blouse, and she breathed, a long, steady breath, as if to hold everything that had quietly passed through her life without needing to name it. In that small room, there was no music, no television sounds, only the soft tap of knitting needles touching, the sound of time passing by, not loudly, but leaving a trace behind. When the evening settled in, she folded the scarf, placed it gently on the table, then stood up, walked slowly toward the stairs. Her hand rested on the wooden railing, the one she'd personally asked the carpenter to install. Not for support, but so she could hum an old tune as she climbed. At the end of the hallway, the motion sensor light flicked on. A warm golden beam brushed across her cotton slippers, still placed neatly at the same spot each night, without anyone needing to remind her. No one scripted that moment. No one captured it on camera. But if someone had been standing at the end of the porch, watching, they might have quietly whispered to themselves, "That woman, she's not growing old. She's simply slowing down." So every step, every breath can be truly her own. Thank you for walking with us all the way to the end of this story. If somewhere in this video you saw a part of yourself, please leave a note below, not to debate, not to discuss, but so someone, somewhere in the world, might read it and know they are not alone. And if you are caring for an older loved one, please sit beside them today, even if just for 10 minutes, and ask, is there something you'd like to do again? With your own hands? Maybe. The answer will come in silence, but their eyes will be a thank you you'll never need words to understand. A life message to you who have walked through many seasons and still carry within you a gentle light that has never gone out. Perhaps now each step is slower. Each small task, like brewing a pot of tea or folding a woolen scarf, takes one more breath to complete. But did you know, it's in these very moments that life still whispers to you, you are still here, and you are still wholly yourself. No one can take away the roles you once held. No house, no matter how new or unfamiliar, can erase the memories woven into your gaze. And every time you peel a mango with care, wipe the dust from a single leaf, or sit by the porch waiting for the sun to rise, you are writing your name again, in the language of someone who has lived, who has loved, and who has learned the beauty of understanding without needing words. If one day you find yourself feeling out of place, please don't be too hard on yourself. Perhaps the world is simply spinning a little faster now, but your eyes, slowing down, can see the things younger ones often miss. Today, you only need to do one small thing. Fold a scarf, water the orchid on the porch, wipe clean an old photo frame, and that is enough to remind the world, I am still here, I am still alive, and I am living on my own rhythm.